we go! Here we go! Here we go!
We're gonna have a fiery Sterling today.
Well, no, you just have a big old air horn, and anytime a Packers fan tries to talk, you just hit the button and drown them out. Like, no, I can't hear you. Go Bears.
It's basically the la 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 la.
Yeah, exactly. Right? You don't even have to live there. You can do it from here. Just remote control everything. Yeah, I'm pissed off, man. Fuck the NFL at this point.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the OneIQ Football Talk podcast. Brendan and Sterling coming at you for another week of football talk. And unfortunately for us here, buddy, there's not a lot to talk about. The last couple weeks, we've kind of had like a little bit of a contract situation here or there that breaks that we can kind of talk about and dive deep into. This week, it's just been kind of like there was the lawsuit for the NFL that came out where it was the $4.3 billion, but then again, $4.3 billion for the NFL is walking around money. That's just like, okay, yeah, sure, here you go.
Yeah.
We're fine with that. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, we'll make that back in by week two.
Right? They're like, oh, we have to use regular toilet paper for 3 days.
Yeah, we can't use actual dollar bills to wipe our ass, so... But that was pretty much the only big thing that I heard. The only other thing that I really heard this week was it was a Tennessee Titans player, defensive lineman. I'm forgetting his name right now. Jeffrey Simmons, I'm pretty sure who it was. He was on the Rich Eisen show, and he was talking about how he feels that the Titans are kind of being overlooked this year, and how he really wants to go after Caleb Williams in week 1, and he has a game plan for him. He's like, the first thing I'm going to yell at him is painted nails. And, you know, everyone's like, oh, he's going to get into his head. He better have like 3 sacks in that game. It's like, you don't think that Caleb Williams, since high school, all the way from when he was playing at Oklahoma, USC year 1, USC year 2, was like, oh, like paint, like what a great insult. Oh my goodness.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know me, I paint my nails too, and it's like you don't get to that age, let alone my age, without hearing everything and getting to the point where you're just like, whatever, bro. I hope Caleb Williams looks up and goes, "What's the matter? Are you imagining my cock in your hand?"
Well, and like the entire time I'm sitting back going like, we haven't done our, because one thing that we've done last year that we're going to be doing this year is we're going to go through each week for our individual teams. I think both of us have predicted at this point that the Bears will beat the Titans in that game, or at least I know that is where I am leaning towards, because I do feel like the Bears are a better team than the Titans. And
yeah, I mean, I've already built a week 1 parlay, and I've got the Bears winning. So yeah, I'm like, we're 10 weeks out, and I'm like, yep, Bears.
And
like, I'm sure that a lot of us are overlooking the Titans a tiny bit. They will probably be a little bit better than a lot of us are giving them credit for, but I don't think they're going to be good enough to, get after Caleb Williams and shut down the Bears in week 1. It's just, they're not going to be that good.
I just look at that Tennessee Titans team, and I just sit back and I go, the Bears have a lot of really, really decent, like they have one of the best wide receiver rooms in the NFL.
They do.
I'm not going to be one of those delusional Bears fans that goes out there and says, oh, they have the best wide receiver room or they have a top 3. I think they have a top 5. I think they're probably the 5th best receiving room in the NFL, having DJ Moore as your number 1. And most people would even argue and say, well, it's probably Keenan Allen. I go, well, I think DJ Moore is the top 5 wide receiver in the league right now. Keenan Allen, he's really, really good, but he's up there in age. And then to throw Rome Odunze in there. These are the starting corners for the Tennessee Titans. Choe Awuzie. I don't even know if I said that right, but L'Jarius Sneed. L'Jarius Sneed's a really good corner. Caleb Farley, Trey Avery. And for me, I'm just looking at that going, there's only really one corner that I'm looking at going that's actually going to be able to really do a lot of. And I look at Jeffrey Simmons and Harold Landry as really being the only people that are on the defensive line that can do anything. And then looking at their linebacking core, Kenneth Murray is pretty much the only linebacker in like the middle seven that is anything of worth. But I don't look at this defense and really sit back and go, oh, this is stellar. This is an amazing defense. Oh my goodness. And then you look at the Titans offense and I go, okay, Will Levis, we all know what he's packing, but can he actually play the football? Tony Pollard,
Right.
I don't think either of us are either really convinced of what Tony Pollard could be. Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, and Tyler Wood. I like that wideout room. I do.
Yeah.
It's old. It's not youthful, but it could be something. I think that could be a honorable mention for maybe a top 10 wide receiver room, just those three guys. Because, Calvin Ridley, I think he's 29 going into this season. He's big, fast, explosive. DeAndre Hopkins is definitely getting up there in age, and Tyler Boyd is, he's kind of that perfect number 3 wide receiver that you're really going to go after. But it's like it's just when Jeffrey Simmons was saying that, I was like, all right, you can sack him and say, oh, painted nails, but he's still gonna get the win, and he's gonna throw
Yeah.
300 yards and 3 touchdowns on you. So congratulations,
I mean,
great burn, buddy.
right? Like it's gonna be a good game. I get where he's coming from. He's starting early, trying to get into his head. Letting people know that he is already looking at week 1.
Yeah,
Which great. I respect that. Like you're ready, you're in the zone, you're ready to go. But like you better come up with something better than that to get
Oh.
into Caleb Williams' head.
yeah, exactly.
Because really, you got to find a way to get in there because he's a rookie quarterback, a number 1 overall. He's going to be in his own head way more than anybody else is going to be able to get in there, probably. You're going to have to come up with something real creative that like just shakes him and he goes, wait, what?
Yeah.
If you can get him with that, then sure, you might be able to shake him a bit, but painted nails isn't going to do it.
Yeah, and I also look at it like this. I go, if this was in Tennessee, the game being played in Tennessee, I would go, okay, maybe a little bit of a different situation. He's on the road. You can kind of, the fans are getting riled up and ready to go. But it's in Chicago. Bears fans are going to be out there in masses. The second that Caleb Williams throws a 15-yard pass, that place is going to be jumping. It's going to be, oh, he's our savior.
It won't even have the second he completes a pass, even if it's a little, wide receiver screen to DJ Moore and Moore breaks it, they're gonna look at Caleb Williams and go, "That's our guy."
Oh, without a
Yeah.
doubt, it is just simply going to be just the whole painted nails thing. I'm like there's so many more creative ways to get into another dude's head. And again, there has been so many things that have gone over on the offseason this year. And I know we talked about it pre-draft with Caleb Williams, and he did a podcast with a few former NFL players. I forget the name of the podcast, but like they were asking him about that. And they said, like,
Yeah.
one of the guys on the podcast, he goes like, "Oh, I don't really like the painted nails. Like, why do you do that?" He goes, "Cool.
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah.
I get that at work. I don't like that. Why do you do it? I was like, well, not your fucking nails, so why do you care?
Well, yeah, and it's one of those things. I'm like, man, like you're at the pinnacle of your sport, and that's the best insult you got. Like, what are we doing?"
Yeah.
It's like, okay, but
Yeah. No, I get where you're coming from, and it is weak. And I mean, if that's all he's got, then Caleb's just gonna laugh.
exactly. Like, I don't
Yeah.
even think he's gonna notice. He could, like,
No.
Jeffrey Simmons could sack Caleb Williams and goes, "Take that, painted nails." Caleb's just gonna get up and go.
Who are you?
It's like,
That still is the best one for getting into the D lineman head. Like even when he sacks you, who are you?
yeah. You were
Yeah,
what? You were what
because
pick at where?
right? Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's
Yeah.
but that's pretty much us recapping this week's news in the NFL. Again, in June, July, once mini caps finish, you have maybe a sprinkle
Yeah.
of pretty much just contract stuff that comes out, but there's nothing terribly crazy. And again, there's always creative stuff that we like to do. And a lot of the times in years past, we usually take this time off and we just don't do anything. But
Yeah.
so we're still pumping out content for you here. And one of the things that we kind of talked about a little bit earlier in the year, just between you and me, is obviously there's been players that have moved over to new teams. And we're thinking to ourselves this week, okay, which players do we think are going to make a serious impact on their new squads, whether it was through trade, whether it was through free agency. I didn't include any draftees because that's a whole different story in of itself, but
Yeah, I didn't include any draft picks either because we usually will go over, what we think about the incoming draft picks when we get closer to the regular season, when we find out which ones are actually going to be in the starting rosters.
yes,
We don't really do this before we know which players are going to get hurt in training camp, which players aren't going to make the cuts for their teams, things like that. So we'll cover the rookies later in the summer, right before the regular season starts. This is more for some of the veteran players that have, as you said, moved teams via free agency or a trade that we think are going to, rejuvenate their career or take a big step forward and just make a bigger impact on this new squad that they're with.
yeah. So obviously we have three players that we have each selected. We don't actually know each other's lists. So I know I have prepared a few guys if we just have a little bit of overlap, but I think we will have potentially at least one guy, maybe
Probably.
more, but yeah. So um please take it away with the first guy that you think could be an impact player for their new team.
Well, I mean, the first one that was on my list is kind of the guy that inspired this idea for me because I think it's just going to be so interesting to see him elsewhere, and that's Brian Burns. Brian Burns, former first round pick for the Carolina Panthers back in 2019. Um, he was traded from Carolina to New York just before the draft this year for the 39th pick and a fifth rounder next year, as well as a swap of their fifths this year. Since he came into the league in 2019, he has been one of the most effective and consistent pass rushers that we've seen. Every year he's putting up similar numbers that, 7 to 12 sacks, around that 80 tackles or so. He's been really, really consistent and good on a terrible team. He's been stuck in Carolina and he's kind of been doing it by himself. He's had a couple of good players to play with here and there on defense, but he's been sort of the star. He's now going to a Giants team that has been struggling, admittedly, on the offensive side of the ball. Their defense, however, like he's gonna be a crazy addition to what could be one of the most fearsome defenses we see this year. He's joining a pass rush and making a trio with himself, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Dexter Lawrence II. Those guys are just going to be monstrous coming after the quarterbacks. It's going to make, especially in that division, it's going to make it tough for guys like Jalen Hurts and Dak Prescott in those divisional games. Um, and really, I think this trio is what's going to be the thing that helps the Giants win a few games this year. Without that defense, they just don't have anything,
Yeah.
you know. And for Burns, I think that's a great asset to be going to a team where he's now got two other excellent dominant pass rushers. So he's going to be able to look at it and go, I'm not going to get double teamed every play. I'm going to be able to get to the quarterback. And I think that's where we see Brian Burns this year break his personal records. I think we see him go over that sack total of 12.5, which is the most he's gotten. I could see him getting 15 or more this year. I think we see his tackle totals go up as well. And really, this gives the Giants another piece on their defense that they can start building around until they can rid themselves of Daniel Jones and start focusing on their offense as well. Because that's just it. If this Giants team can find an offense combined with this defense, we'd be talking about them in the same breath as the Philadelphia Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys as a potential to win that division. Really, it's the offense that holds them back. And Brian Burns, I think he's poised to do great things this year. We're gonna be hearing about him on a weekly basis, and we're gonna get some good highlight reel packages out of him this year in that Giants uniform.
Yeah, I had Brian Burns as one of my backup players because I looked at that and I went, this is a guy that is pretty much for me is going to be an honorable mention because I think the problem for Brian Burns going to the Giants is the fact that the team that he plays on, the defense is going to be spectacular. When he was playing with Carolina, the only real other defensive star that he played with was Derek Brown, and Derek Brown is alone on that team now. And so that's a whole different conversation for the Panthers. But yeah, going out there and playing with Kayvon Thibodeau, who is a young edge rusher, going to be in his third year, and he really broke out last year. He really played well, and this is a guy that I loved coming out of the draft. I thought he could be, a superstar edge rusher, and now pairing him with Brian Burns, or pairing Brian Burns with Kayvon Thibodeau, that's just massive. But another big thing that helps out edge rushers so much is interior pressure. Like
Yeah.
Dexter Lawrence is the perfect guy to have there because you always talk about it. Having two great edge rushers is awesome. But if you don't have guys that can pump the interior and push that back and force the quarterbacks to go outwards, because here's the thing, in today's NFL, most quarterbacks know how to move up into the pocket. And if you have two dominant edge rushers, all you have to do is move up into the pocket and you have that little bit of extra second to get that ball away. But if you have that interior pressure and you don't have anywhere to move up into the pocket, going to be doing a lot of really good things. I think this Giants defense is going to be spectacular in terms of getting to the quarterback. I think they're going to be gassed come the end of the year though, because it's going to be one of those things of like, okay, we're getting 4 sacks a game, and we're getting key crucial sacks where we're pinning them back in their own 10 yards and are their own 10-yard line. They're punting the ball, and guess what, our offense goes 3 and out. It's like, okay, that was great for nothing. Like, awesome. But yeah, I agree. The fact that the Giants got Brian Burns for what they got Brian Burns for, because we think back a year prior to with Brian Burns, the Carolina Panthers rejected a trade offer at the trade deadline from the Los Angeles Rams for 2 first-round picks to get Brian Burns. And the Panthers was like, nope. And then I think a year, well, again, a trade deadline and then a season later, so a year and a half, it was like, okay, we'll trade him for a second and a fifth. It's like, my guys.
Well, yeah, because it's not like he fell off.
No.
That's not why he's worth less. It was just he flat out said, "I'm not playing for you guys anymore."
Yeah.
And so that put Carolina in a position where they had to take what they could get, and a second was the best they could get.
Yeah.
They, as the Panthers do, they shot themselves in the foot. And it's going to be really interesting to see because Brian Burns he's very versatile. In the 4 years he's been in the league, he's played all 4 of the edge rushing positions, left and right end, as well as left and right linebacker. And so you're going to be able to move him around to wherever the weakness is on any given team. Like if they're weak on, the one side where Thibodeau is, then you move Burns over there as well, and you have both of them rushing on the same side.
Terrifying.
Like it's exactly terrifying. And if they're a little more spread out, you move them back to the other, and you got it coming from both ends. Like it's
versatility is a very big thing.
Interesting to watch.
Versatility is what got Myles Garrett the Defensive Player of the Year award this year, and Brian Burns is exactly that. He is a versatile, skilled player, and just looking at his stats throughout his career, 5 years with Carolina, his first year 7.5, then 9, then 12.5, and then this last year he had 8. So he's averaging about 9 sacks per season. And,
Mhm.
again, we talk about what the Panthers were in 2022 when he had those 12 and a half. Again, really, he only had Derek Brown, and that defense wasn't super great. And so, him going to the Giants, I think you could pretty confidently say you're going to see double digits from him this year, going opposite of Kayvon Thibodeau and having Dexter Lawrence. But yeah, this is just one of those picks for me where you just look at the guy and you feel bad because this defense is going to be, or it should be on paper, so good
Yeah.
because of what you see from the edge rushers. I'm not convinced with their secondary or, because you just talk about their top corner. It's Deontay Banks. Doesn't really inspire a lot of hope. Tyler
Mhm.
Niven, a rookie this year, and then Jason Pinnock, their other safety. Their linebacking core, Bobby Okereke and Micah McFadden, are okay. I like Okereke a lot more. Uh,
Yeah.
like he's a solid linebacker, but it's really going to be a team of pretty much Thibodeau, Burns, Lawrence, and Okereke. Other than that, this defense isn't going to be much, and the offense. So you just feel bad because the offense is just going to be so bad.
It is, but as I said, it's something for the Giants to at least be able to build around as they look to offload and move away from this Daniel Jones contract. Unless, as we've said, miraculously he comes out this year and is the quarterback that they saw when they decided to draft him, and he magically becomes that guy all of a sudden, then great, the Giants could be good. I just I don't believe it'll happen.
Yeah, I kind of want to have like a bet laid on line to see how good Daniel Jones, and like this is one of the things. Maybe next week we have like our own imagined player bets for what we think certain players in the league, whether it could be bad or good, and that'll
Yeah.
be a fun thing that we can talk about next week. Obviously, because we do talk about sports gambling here, and it's just one of those funny things. But I would. I would have to bet Daniel Jones would not be a very good, and we'll probably see Drew Lock at some point, if not Tommy DeVito or Nathan Rourke at some
Yeah.
point on this roster. But yeah, Brian Burns, my fourth guy on my particular list, and so yeah, that was your number one guy for me. One of the guys that I wanted to talk about that I don't think is necessarily getting as much hype as I think a lot more people should be talking about is Hollywood Brown going to the Chiefs. For me, I looked at that move and I went, Hollywood Brown, Marquise Brown is not the best wide receiver in the league. I don't think he's a top 25. I don't think he's a top 30. He's a solid wide receiver, though. He's pretty much one of those guys you look at and go, any NFL roster would love to have Marquise Brown because of his speed and just his overall playmaking ability. I look at that and I go, he is the perfect guy for the Chiefs to have on their roster right now because it's a 1 year deal. So, you know what? If he just kind of has a little bit more of a lackluster season, you're not really putting too much risk on it. But I think the biggest thing for him this season is he's coming in. He can be a little bit more of that top guy. We don't know what's going to happen with Rashid Rice. So if Rashid Rice ends up playing this entire season, well, great. You have a pretty solid duo of Rashid Rice and Marquise Brown. But the other thing is Xavier Worthy. Being there, he's going to be able to learn from Marquise Brown. And I think people are going to ultimately underestimate what Marquise Brown is going to be able to do for this team because is he as fast as Tyreek Hill? No. Almost no one in the league is. But he's going to be able to give that Chiefs offense that little bit of spark that we were kind of missing from Tyreek Hill while Xavier Worthy gets up to speed in the NFL. And having those two speedsters is going to be really, really, really dynamic. I think Marquise Brown, he's going to be someone that is just going to go completely overlooked for a little bit. And I don't think people should be overlooking him. I think he's going to have the poise to potentially have a sneaky 1,000-yard season.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I've been overlooking him simply because I haven't been super impressed with what I've seen with him over the years. He's gone to the perfect team though. You're right. Like being with the Chiefs where the primary focus is going to be stopping Travis Kelsey and getting after Patrick Mahomes. it's gonna afford Brown the opportunities to get those sneaky yards. The only thing I'll say is while it is people overlooking him, it could inflate his stock too much for next year, and whoever ends up picking him up will likely be disappointed in what they get, because I don't think he would be as impressive on a team outside of the Chiefs myself.
Totally agree. This is pretty much one of those scenarios where he is really going to be just the perfect candidate for the Chiefs because again, Andy Reid's system, he knows how to make wide receivers good. And there
Yeah.
again, it didn't happen with McCole Hardman when he came back. It didn't happen with Kadarius Toney, but you know, Marquise Brown, when he was drafted in the first round of the Baltimore Ravens, it was kind of in that time where it was like, oh, you got Lamar Jackson, a weapon. But it was in that time, it was like, oh, we want to develop Lamar kind of as this ultimate superstar weapon of where he's going to be kind of the main focus. He's going to run, and wide receivers weren't really kind of a main focus and target of the Ravens. But he still had 1,000-yard season into that mix where he had 6 touchdowns. And then going to the Cardinals had just been so bad, and there's been so many injuries due to Kyler Murray and just other things around him that it's really tough for him to really get the ball. And at least going to the Chiefs, it's going to be a stable thing of where even if Rashid Rice isn't there, you know, you have Travis Kelce there. You have Xavier Worthy, who's definitely going to be able to take pressure off of Marquise Brown. But there's other guys alongside that roster that are just going to be able to calm things down. And when you have the best quarterback in the entire league throwing you the ball, you're going to have a lot more confidence there. And for me, I just think he's just going to have a sneaky good year. Is he going to be one of the best wide receivers in the league this year? No, by far not even close. I think he can have a sneaky 1,000-yard season. We're gonna look back on it and go, damn, like that was a good year for him. Like wow,
Yeah.
like we should have given that more attention. And
Yeah, it's just tough because, with him playing for the Ravens, I watched him a lot, obviously, being a
yes,
Steelers fan. And like a lot of what I saw out of him, it was fairly two-dimensional player, It's like he's either catching it quickly on a slant screen or he's running a deep route.
yep,
You don't see him running a lot of complex routes and finding the open field for his quarterback when he's scrambling around, and that could be a detriment because we've seen Patrick Mahomes do that a lot, where his pocket breaks down and he scrambles out left or right and he starts trying to direct traffic. And if Brown's not paying attention, he's going to miss those cues.
yeah, and that's gonna be one of those things. But I think we definitely talked about when Hollywood Brown entered free agency, the Chiefs were his perfect destination because of a
Yes,
lot
we
of
did.
these things. And to me, it's just one of those things. After it was signed, we're like, oh yeah, that was the perfect move for him. And then it's been kind of radio silence afterwards. And again, for me, I just brought this up going, you know what?
Yep.
I just think it's gonna be a sneaky good year. I don't even think it's necessarily going to be some other team is going to offer him big money. I think the Chiefs are going to go, look, we're going to give you a 2-year deal, $25 million for those 2 years. So you're going to be making, what would that be? 12.5
12 and a half
million.
per year.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, he gets a million and a half bump in his current bonus because he's making 11 million for this current season. And
Yep.
that's what the Chiefs do. They find guys that are like, listen, you're not going to be the superstar, but we're going to afford you the opportunity to win championships, and you're still going to be making some pretty goddamn good money. So,
Yep.
for me, that's why I had Marquise Brown up on my list.
No, definitely a good pick. Yeah, I like that one. Um, for myself, second guy that came to mind for me is Saquon Barkley. Going to the Philadelphia Eagles this year after his whole career with the Giants, a former second overall pick. He was super hyped coming in. He struggled with some injuries and severely inconsistent offense around him during his time in New York. This is a great move for him. I think we're gonna start to get to see the Saquon Barkley we all thought we were gonna see when he got drafted. But when all of the pressure was on him, all of the weight of the team was on him, he collapsed, which happens. You can't put it all on one guy. This is a team sport, not an individual star thing. And so I think him being with this Eagles team that is so talented already, it's going to allow him to sit back and just play his game. And he's going into an offense that is so many great wide receivers. You've got Jalen Hurts there. We've talked about it. I think the Eagles are going to struggle a bit with the tush push not having Jason Kelsey there. And that's going to give opportunities to Saquon Barkley in the red zone, and in those goal line plays. And I really think we're going to see him go off this year. I'm predicting he's going to get over 1,300 rushing yards this year. I think he's going to either come close to or surpass his most, because he's edged above that 1,300 twice in his career. I think we're going to see that again, and I think he's going to eclipse that 10 touchdown mark as well, because we'll see those struggles for that tush push early on, that brotherly shove, and at that point, I think they're going to look at it and go, well, this isn't working, but we got Barkley. Why don't we just hand it to him and let him pound the rock for 2 yards, get that touchdown? And as soon as he does that a couple times and it works, I think that Eagles offense is just going to go, yep, that's what we're doing from now on. Forget this QB sneak. Let's do this now. And so yeah, I think Saquon Barkley, this is going to be like a reemergence for his career. He's going to be able to come back and go, look, yeah, see, I could have been one of the best. I'm a little older now, so I'm not going to be able to be putting up the 2,000-yard seasons like people were predicting for him early in his career. But he's going to become a key player for this Eagles offense.
Yeah, I had Saquon Barkley also on this list. I looked at this move because he's just so talented, and he's battled through injuries that he's had in his career. He had a year in 2021 where he was playing, but he wasn't fully healthy, and he did miss a handful of games as well. So, you just look at him and go, pretty much ever since the Daniel Jones era started for the Giants, it was like, okay, Saquon, you need to really take over and just kind of be this guy. And you know what? As much as we talk about running backs and not wanting to pay them, it's because unfortunately the running backs can't be a position where it just takes over games, and they need to be a part of a cohesive unit. And when you have a guy as talented as Saquon Barkley, you need to use him in a cohesive unit, and maybe not necessarily a running back room of just constantly moving guys, but having other options out there. Because if the entire team on the opposite side of the field knows all we need to do is stop this guy and we win the game, it makes it really easy. I remember back in the day, there was a game where a starting quarterback got hurt against the Bears the week prior to, and all I could think about was, oh, Brian Urlacher's going to feast this week because all they're going to do is hand the ball off, and it's like all we have to do is stop the run, and that's exactly what they did. And it was such an enjoyable game to watch, because all you're sitting back going like, okay, yeah, this is all they need to do is just stop the run. And
Yep.
that's what it was with the Giants these last couple years. And yeah, when the second that I saw Saquon Barkley sign with the Eagles, I went, damn. And
Yeah.
the other thing that I'm thinking about with this move is we're talking a lot about how Derrick Henry goes over to the Ravens and it's just going to be this spectacular monster unstoppable RPO, but we forget about Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley, because while Saquon Barkley isn't 6'4", 240 pounds, he's 6', 230. Jalen Hurts is, I
Yep.
think, 6'1", 240. Those are powerful, powerful guys that are not going to be easy to stop. And so the RPO opportunity is going to be scary with this
Mhm.
Eagles. But here's the thing with the Eagles, they need to scheme it up offensively correctly, because last year that offense was a fucking mess.
Yeah.
And we talk about it, just go like that was one of the biggest problems with the Eagles last year, is that they just were a mess offensively. There was like some weeks you're like, what are we doing? They had games of where it was like, okay, we're gonna hand the ball off to DeAndre Swift, and that's all we're gonna do to win this game. It's like, okay, that's great, but you you now have to really get the entire machine going. And when you have a guy like Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts in the backfield, that creates a very scary duo. Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, you have, your shifty guy with your power guy, but with Barkley and Hurts, it's power and power.
Yeah.
And it's
And
going to
not
be
only
really
that,
fun.
like a big difference too is they've got AJ Brown, they've got Devontae Smith, they've got Dallas Goddard. Like they have so many other weapons, so it's not just those two. Whereas with the Ravens, it kind of is just those two. Until we see that Mark Andrews is truly back to form. But yeah, it's that Eagles team. If they can get the offense rolling, as you said, and figure it out this year, they could be unstoppable. Because yeah, last year it was like they were driving a fucking pickup truck that was stuck in the mud and they were just flooring it, spinning their tires every week. It was so frustrating to watch.
They were driving a Toyota Camry through mud without proper tires and then just flooring it and going, how come this isn't working? It's like, well, you're not using the right equipment to do this. But the other big thing with Saquon Barkley is the Giants' offensive line that was in front of him almost never gave him really much openings. He has Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, Tyler Steen, Lane Johnson as his main offensive line. That's a damn good. And again, we don't really know what the center position is going to look like now that Jason Kelsey isn't there. I know there's a lot of hope with the new guy coming in, but
and Dallas Goddard is a sneaky good blocker as well. He is good at opening up those holes for his running back, and so having that there too is going to be. I think we could be poised to see some great things from Saquon. I'm excited to watch him, even though I can't stand the Eagles.
Yeah, neither can I. Eagles, not a massive love for them. Just I think it's mostly coming down to their fan base of just being one of the most obnoxious fan bases out there. But
I mean, for me, it's the Pittsburgh Philly. It's the Pennsylvania rivalry.
For me, it was also when they signed Alshon Jeffrey back in the day. I was really unhappy about that because I wanted the Bears to keep him. And so like that gave me a little bit of saltiness, and then they won the Super Bowl and I was like, yeah. Yeah, and so there's
a Minecraft villager.
Exactly. There was a little bit of that anger flowing through the body at that time, and it is what it is. But yeah, I like Jalen Hurts. I've always liked Jalen Hurts, so that kind of gave me a little bit of the love back for the organization because I've really I was a big fan of Jalen Hurts when he went to Oklahoma and we started to see what he was capable of, as opposed to when he was at Alabama. It was like, okay, you're big, fast, and strong. You're gonna pick ball. You're gonna hold ball. You go run ball. It's like, okay, they didn't develop his passing, and then we saw what happened at Oklahoma. I don't think Jalen Hurts is the best passing quarterback that we've ever seen, but I think he's more underrated than people are giving him credit for.
Well, and I think he might be one of the best well-rounded quarterbacks because he's got that ability to break pocket, reset, and run the ball as well as throw it. He does have every skill set you need to be a successful quarterback in this league.
Yeah. Now, as long as Kenny Pickett isn't quarterback, then yeah, for Philly.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, Saquon Barkley, we both agree that move is just a stellar move for the Philadelphia Eagles, and especially in that division of where you're going to need to kind of have you're going to have to be able to compete with that Dallas defense. And, the Commanders, I don't think either of us think they're going to be a great team, but they're going to be an exciting team with, Jaden
They're
Daniels.
on the rise.
Yeah.
For sure. They're on the rise. They even last year they made a few strides with Sam Howell, and moving on from Sam Howell, I think it'll be a bit of a step back to start again. But it's it's that one step back to take 3 more steps forward for them. So yeah, that Commanders team is on the rise. It's too early still.
Yeah, and I will say Saquon Barkley obviously was also on my list for that particular situation. The last player that I have on my list is a defensive player, and that happens to be Christian Wilkins. Christian Wilkins is easily one of he's a top 5 defensive lineman, interior defensive lineman in the league. And the fact that he went from Miami, where he was very much sought after, and he goes to the Vegas Raiders, I just sit back and I go, man, this is going to be a fun, fun situation to watch, because both of us agreed Max Crosby was the rightful defensive player of the year last year.
Yep.
And he did that with, a handful of players that maybe shouldn't have been there. And he was truly the leader of that defense. He made that defense a lot better than what a lot of us thought. And Tyree Wilson didn't really step up to the way that we thought he potentially could have. I think Tyree Wilson is going to have a much bigger year this year than what we saw from his rookie year. So having Max Crosby, Christian Wilkins, and then also throwing in Tyree Wilson, that's going to be a really, really scary front seven to deal with, because we talked about what the Giants were doing with Burns and Thibodeau with Dexter Lawrence there. But Christian Wilkins, in my opinion, is a better defensive tackle than Dexter Lawrence. And Dexter Lawrence is one of the very best. Like this is...
Yeah, I mean, Christian Wilkins has got to be one or two. Like,
I think
he's
he might...
in the top, I think.
I think he's top 3. I'm not quite sure.
Well, I think he makes the rise this year into that top 2
Yes.
because of what he's playing with. Yeah.
Yeah, and Max Crosby, he's just a different breed. And having an edge rusher, we talk about what it's like to have a interior pressure for an edge rusher, but having an edge rusher that can just take over a game like Max Crosby can. And like, we both think Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns are good edge rushers. Neither of them are top 5 edge rushers. They are just consistent. I think top 15.
Burns top 10, Thibodeau top 15.
Yeah. But Max Crosby, I think both of us look at that and go, he is, depending on who it is, they might say 1. I think both of us say he's number 2 edge rusher in the NFL, only behind Mr. Watt. But that's the thing, is that like he is number 2, arguing the fact that he can potentially be number 1. And depending on who you are, both of us agree. I know you're always going to say TJ because I'm not going to say fan biasy, but again, well, I say TJ is the number 1 edge rusher in the NFL, but I know there are people that could make the case for Max Crosby to be the number 1 because of what we've seen from him these last couple years. Having Wilkins join that is just going to be outstanding, because Wilkins, in my opinion, he's like Akeem Hicks. And if anyone remembers what Akeem Hicks was with the Bears, he was this guy that played the interior, kind of the edge, big guy that was a master at the run stop, but also had upside as a pass rusher. This is what Christian Wilkins is going to add to this Raiders defense, and it is going to be unbelievably fun to watch.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to that Raiders defense just because it's going to be so good. Like that front 7, like those 3 especially, it's going to be lights out.
And then also having Robert Spillane down the middle, kind of quarterbacking that defense, is also going to be massive there. So
I wish Pittsburgh had kept him around. I knew that was a mistake to let him go.
Yeah, because he was there for... Robert Spillane this was his first year with the Raiders, and so I have to agree, big win for the Raiders on that one. They're building a defense. I'm still a little bit worried about their secondary. I don't have a lot of trust there, so that does hurt a pass rush a little bit if a quarterback can just hike the ball, immediately throw it. That does hurt it, but if your secondary can hold it, make the quarterback hold the ball for 2 seconds against this D line, bad things are going to happen. So it's for me, Christian Wilkins, I think obviously he was the most expensive free agent acquisition this offseason. He should be a top priority type guy from what we see, but I think it's maybe a little bit... I think more people are looking at it from the standpoint of, oh, this is great for Max Crosby. I'm sitting back going, this is great for Christian Wilkins, because he everyone's going to be focused on Max Crosby, and he's just going to be single teamed. He's not going to be double teamed anymore. It's just going to be like, oh, I have to go up against the center.
Well, and
Okay,
that's just it. Like both of them, Wilkins and Max Crosby, I've seen both of them fight through triple teams to
yeah,
still get to the quarterback. And so it's like, can you imagine having to find a way to put 6 guys on those two and then go, wait, there's still like 3 other guys that are rushing the quarterback. What do we do?
Malcolm Kuntz definitely had a big step up last year, and then again
Mhm.
Tyree Wilson. He was a former 7th round pick. I said this
Yep.
kid is incredibly raw, so he's going to need some time in the NFL, and learning from Max Crosby is definitely going to be something, it's going to be really beneficial for him, and so yeah, you can't just have 3 guys or 6 guys block 2 players and then forget about the rest of the defensive line. There's
Yep.
gonna be times where you're gonna have to put double coverage on both of those guys and just hope that the other offensive linemen figure it out. But there's gonna be times where you look at it and go, okay, are we putting the single coverage on Max Crosby or Christian Wilkins?
Mhm.
Do we want to get screwed on the edge or do we want to get screwed on the inside? Either
Yep.
way, we're getting screwed.
100%. Yeah. I think Wilkins is poised to have himself a good year, and that Raiders defense just got a whole lot better.
Still some question marks in the secondary for sure, but yeah,
Yeah.
that addition right there, you just sit back and go, okay, if we thought Max Crosby was the defensive player of the year last year and he just
Mhm.
continues to get better and better from what we've seen, I'm not saying historical numbers and things that we've seen this season from him, but I think to say 18 plus sacks this year from Max Crosby is without a doubt a strong possibility, if not getting to that 20 number.
Oh, yeah, I still fully expect to see TJ Watt and Max Crosby race into 20,
Yeah.
the two of them. Yeah, it's going to be a race to see who can get there, because that's just it. I mean, TJ Watt's still feeling disrespected, I think, and he's like, okay, what more do I have to do to get that defensive player of the year again? All right, let's see what I can do.
Yeah,
So
and I
that,
think you and I have kind of figured out why the NFL hasn't done it. It's going like this is just your normal, and
yeah,
which
it's
is
just
not necessarily the right thing to do. But
no,
I think the
no,
NFL is just going like, we know you're getting 17 sacks a year. Fucking get
right,
19. Do better.
right, and then he goes out and puts up 22, and they're like, well, no, we meant 29, not 19. Yeah,
Yeah. Like, I just
but I
want to
mean,
read the stats off for TJ Watt and his sacks: 7, 13, 14 and a half, 15, 22.5, tying the record, 5.5 injuries that year, and then casually puts up 19 in the however many years that has been that he's played. He has he has 96.5 sacks.
yep, I know, it's absolutely nuts, and he's gonna get a lot more this year because my last guy on my list,
I was gonna say,
as
how long before we talk about Patrick Queen?
exactly. I mean, I had to, and this is a guy where it's not necessarily he is going to improve going to the team. This helps the team improve because Patrick Queen, we know former 1st round pick for the Ravens. He's played there since 2020, and he's been so consistent and reliable. But something happened after the team traded for Roquan Smith, and then they declined Queen's 5th-year option. I think he felt a little bit slighted, and he still went out there last year and set career records for himself.
He had great numbers.
133 tackles, 84 of them solo tackles last year, and I think that's when he decided he took less money and went to Pittsburgh, and he's like, I'm going to jump ship. I'm going to go to the division rival. I'm going to play in Pittsburgh, and this is the position that the Steelers defense has been struggling to fill ever since that Ryan Shazier injury. They haven't been able to find that middle linebacker, and now they've got him. 120 plus tackler up the middle is exactly what they've been needing, and he is going to fill that gap, and it has potential to completely flip this AFC North around because You know, there's been talks for years. They're like, oh, the Steelers are falling. They're dropping off finally. You know, it's the Bengals division, it's the Ravens division, it's the Browns division. But this defense every year has still been one of the best. Last year, they fell off near the end because they were so exhausted from the offense being so bad. The offense arguably got better in the key position at quarterback this year by adding Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Either one of those guys
Is
is
an
going to be
upgrade.
better than any of the three we had last year. And so I look at that and go, that's going to help that defense hopefully not get as tired throughout the year, which means they will be able to remain dominant. You know, and like you just got to look at this team. Like he's going to be playing alongside TJ Watt, as we mentioned, Alex Highsmith, Cameron Hayward, all rushing the quarterback. And then you've got Minka Fitzpatrick, that new emerging star corner in Joey Porter Jr., you know, who was excellent last year in his rookie year. I expect him to just be better this year. And then you've got Elandon Roberts still there in the middle to play behind Patrick Queen or alongside him if they've got that two linebacker set. And then we still have Nick Herbig in the wings, who is, you know, is he going to replace TJ Watt or is he going to learn that middle linebacker as well and be able to help with some of those tackles? Like this defense could set the league on fire next year. You know, we've talked about other defenses where it's one guy, two guys, three guys that are really good. Like I just listed off 7 guys on this defense alone that are game changers. And so this defense has the potential to be the number 1 defense next year. And if the offense can get it rolling, this Steelers team all of a sudden, instead of having to panic into a rebuild mode, have sidestepped themselves into a talk of will they finally break this streak of losing playoff games? And if the defense stays healthy and is as dominant as I think they're going to be, it's going to be great. And Patrick Queen, he is foaming at the mouth for these Ravens games. The fact that he's going to have to wait all the way till December to play them, oh, I hope he's healthy then because I cannot wait, as I've said repeatedly, for Queen and Henry to meet during that run game because that's what it's going to be. Patrick Queen is there to stop this run game while TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith get after those quarterbacks.
Yeah, for me, I was never gonna choose Patrick Queen. I knew you were gonna choose Patrick Queen,
You
so
knew I,
yeah.
I
But
had
yeah, for me, one of the reasons why I was never going to consider Patrick Queen. It wasn't just because I knew you were going to choose him. It was because there's a lot of things that you said there that I totally agree with. Again, he's going to be playing with this player, this player, this player, this player. And for me, that's the exact reason of why I don't think he's necessarily going to go out there and change this defense. I think he's going to be a great cog that is going to improve the defense, and he's kind of one of those maybe not necessarily missing piece, but he's one of those things, maybe like the lubricant that just helps it run a little bit more efficiently. I just look at him and I go, he's going to be a product of being around Pro Bowl here, Pro Bowl there, Pro Bowl, Pro Bowl, Pro Bowl, Pro Bowl, All Pro, Hall of Famer, and TJ Watt, down the line. I just go, you know what? He's going to be a great addition, but he's not one of those guys that I think is going to change the Steelers defense. He's just going to be
no.
a good piece to the puzzle. And for me, that was the reason why I stepped back and went, I'm not going to choose him because I don't think he's necessarily going to be like a Christian Wilkins of where either his numbers are going to be shooting up like what we're potentially seeing, or a Brian Burns or Mikael Hardman or some of the other guys that we've mentioned, like a Saquon Barkley. I just think he's just gonna go to a team that he's just going to be around, and he's just gonna be a solid player. He's exactly what the Steelers needed to do this offseason. Go out there, find a young linebacker that is a tackling machine, because he's only 24 years old right now.
Yep.
Still very young. This was their biggest need in the entire team. I think before going into the offseason, when you and I were talking, it was okay, what are the Steelers' biggest need? They need a middle linebacker and they need more offensive line help. And if it came down to it, I think both of us would have said that if there was a top tier middle linebacker in the draft at that point, we would have gone, they probably should have picked middle linebacker if they didn't go Queen. I think the fact that they picked up Patrick Queen, it allowed them to go out there and get Fatanu who's going to be a solid left tackle for you guys. But yeah, for me, it was just one of those things, is just the amount of talent that's there. He's not going to be a focal point. His numbers are probably going to still be around that 120 to 140 mark. So again, if he gets past that 133, career year, great. But I just think it's more or less going to be, he's just kind of the lubrication that helps make this a little bit more efficient. But other than that,
Yeah.
I completely agree with everything that you're saying. He's going to come in, he's going to be brought this, and that. He's a phenomenal player, and that was a great pickup by the Steelers. The one thing that I'm interested in is, again, we talked about, or you talked about him foaming at the mouth for the Ravens. Is he going to stay healthy for the Ravens? And that's been
I mean,
arguably the biggest issue for the Steelers these last couple of years, is middle linebacker health. Again, he hasn't really had any medical health issues, and I don't expect him to have medical health issues. It's just been kind of that curse for the Steelers. It's every linebacker that has come in since Ryan Shazier went down. It almost just seems like a cursed position for the Steelers right now.
it does, 100%. And that is a concern for me. But at the same time, because he's so healthy, he is much younger than anybody we've brought in since we traded up to draft Devin Bush. And so I am confident he'll be able to keep that health about him, because and that's just it. I picked him because he was that key puzzle piece that's been missing on this defense. That 100+ middle linebacker, run stopping tackler.
Yeah.
That has been missing for years. And that in itself, it's going to allow the other guys to be able to work on what they need to do instead of going outside their comfort zone and playing that run tackling position. And people forget about Cameron Hayward. He was banged up a little bit last year, so he didn't have the best year, but he is still an all-pro, one of the best defensive linemen, one of the most versatile defensive linemen in the league. He plays all three of those front positions, and
he's
he
good
does
at
all
each of
them
those
well.
positions too.
Exactly. And so I think this just, it's, as I said at the beginning, it's not going to magically change Patrick Queen. He's not going to have that career, but this defense, I think, has the potential to all of a sudden shoot up and be number one in every category, like they haven't been able to do since, I think, 2009 or 10.
Yeah, it is going to be absolutely solid for
Yeah.
the Steelers. Like, again, we talked about that, going like, you can name Pro Bowler here, Pro Bowler there, really solid player here, another Pro Bowler, a young guy that looks like he could be a Pro Bowl caliber guy. And again, it was just really like, what is missing on that already unbelievable defense? And it was just that middle linebacker to just kind of help solidify everything. They found him. And again, he has that little bit of extra spark, saying, you know what, I didn't want to play for the Ravens anymore. They traded for Roquan Smith, which was kind of a little bit of a slap in the face to Patrick Queen, going like, okay, like, I thought I was your Roquan Smith, like, and you went out there and traded for this guy, this, that, and the other thing, declined my option, which, again, I thought they would have at least executed that and just been like, okay, we'll have you for this 5th-year option and then we'll let you leave. But again, a few slaps to the face for him. He's going to be motivated. It's going to be really interesting. My question to you is, are you surprised I didn't have Keenan Allen on my list?
No, because because I didn't have him on my list even as a backup either, because he was so good last year, and I think we're actually going to see the opposite from him. I think he's going to take a step back because of what else is already on that Bears team. Like, you could take Keenan Allen off of that Bears team, and they're going to be just as good as with him on it, in my opinion.
I don't think just as good, but I still think they would be very good with DJ Moore and Romo Dunze. I think having Keenan Allen there is, like, having him out of the slot is a massive, massive thing, because, DJ Moore is an outside guy with the ability to play some slot. Romo Dunze is without a doubt an outside guy, and to have a true, Hall of Fame level player that is just kind of that, slot guy, makes it so much easier. And again, you look at quarterbacks, especially young quarterbacks, if they can just have that easy throw to the slot receiver, Like, how often in Madden when we're playing do we just always look to our number one? We always place our number one receiver as our slot guy just because it's easy to hit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even Tom Brady has said that
Oh, yeah,
repeatedly, that that the slot guy and the tight ends are always your first primary targets because they get out fast and they get open earlier.
yeah,
You don't have to hold the ball as long, and that's what this league has become with all these edge rushers that are getting to the quarterback in 3 seconds or less. They got to get the balls out fast, and so
yep,
that's why we've seen this emergence of slot receivers and tight ends. And that was why I said for so long that Chase Claypool shot himself in the foot by saying he wanted to be a number one wideout instead of being a slot wide receiver, where I think he would have been dominant with his size, because he was basically a fast tight end is
yep.
what he could have played as a slot. You're getting more targets every game. You can throw some big blocks because you're a huge dude, and he just got too big.
Yeah, well, for me,
And
like
here, got too
Keenan
big here.
Allen, yes, yeah, he definitely got way too big in the
Yeah.
worst possible way. Keenan Allen, for me, he was kind of that same area of Patrick Queen, of where obviously
Mhm.
before Romo Dunze got there, a little bit of a different situation, but he's kind of that. Like, even after the Bears draft or traded for Keenan Allen, I still said
Mhm.
at number 9, if Romo Dunze or Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr. is there, I don't
Yeah.
care what else. Like, you have to pick a wide receiver because having 3 really good ones, like today's NFL world, it's unless you have the best quarterback in the league, you have to have a wide receiver room that is ungodly stoppable. And
Yeah.
like like I was pounding the table, like when Romo Dunze was there, I would have cried if they didn't pick him, and I'm so glad
Yeah.
they did. And it's just one of those things. He kind of felt like Patrick Queen, where he's just going to be kind of that lubrication that just gets everything buttery smooth and just operating well. And so that, for me, he was on the list, but I was like, he doesn't deserve, because he's just going to be more of that lubricating factor that's just going to get it running smooth.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't really again add him to my list because of he wasn't
Because you hate the
the
Bears, I get it.
missing
Yeah,
piece like Patrick Queen was. Like with
just say you hate
with
the Bears.
Queen. Hmm?
Just say you hate the Bears.
I don't.
I'm
I
messing. I'm
want to
messing
see.
with you.
I
Yeah,
want, I want Bears Steelers Super Bowl, man.
I know.
That
I'm
would
just
be so
fucking
much
with you.
fun. But no, I mean, Allen, it was more just there is already somebody at that position, so it wasn't
Yeah.
the biggest concern that you needed number one, and also the age too.
Yes. 34,
33-year-old Keenan
33.
Allen to
Yep.
24-year-old Patrick Queen. It's a fairly vast difference in that way.
Totally.
And Keenan Allen's also only there on the
One
final year
year.
of his deal here,
Yeah.
whereas Patrick Queen signed for 3 years, so he's a Steeler for the next few years. Like he is.
Yes.
If TJ Watt decides he doesn't want to sign or the Steelers don't want to pay him as much as he wants this year, Patrick Queen all of a sudden becomes the face of that defense next year.
Is TJ on his last year of his deal?
Yeah, the Steelers have something like 133 million next year for cap space because they have to sign TJ, they have to sign Cam Hayward, like that. There's a lot of guys coming up on contract this year. So I think that was part of why they wanted to go out and get a veteran alongside trying to trade for Justin Fields, because they're like, we kind of got to try and win this year because we don't know if TJ Watt's going to be willing to take that hometown discount to stay with the Steelers next year, or if he's going to go out there and go, no, I want to be the highest paid edge rusher ever.
Yeah, and but my question to that would be for TJ Watt. Obviously, he loves playing for the Steelers, but my thing for him is he looking at this team kind of maybe in a scenario kind of like myself, of where I've looked at it and gone, it's always just been middle of the park. They've always
Yep.
been good enough to make the playoffs, but they've never been able to do something. So I'm not going to say I'm worried that he's going to just be like, listen guys, I can't trust this organization to take us to that next step, but I would have to imagine that has to be something that's running through his mind, of going, how many years have I been here and we've never won a playoff game? And
Yep.
yet we've been this team that's just been this, and that. We had the Hall of Fame quarterback, and he just simply might want to change. I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's going to remain a Pittsburgh Steeler for the rest of his days, unless the Steelers
Yep.
trade him. But yeah, for me, I kind of look at that and I go, that
Mhm.
maybe that might be an area of concern of this for the Steelers of just going, we might not be able to re-sign him, especially if we go to the playoffs and get bounced in the wild card round again this year, because
100%.
yeah, just
No, I,
because
I agree. And I wouldn't fault him for that if he looked at that and was like, well, shit, like we're not getting there. And here comes the Kansas City Chiefs or the San Francisco 49ers, and they're offering me just as much or more than what Pittsburgh is. At least I know I'm going to get to a Super Bowl with them. So
yeah,
no, I fully expect to see something like that. And that's why
we'll just think
I
of the
think the
Texans
Steelers.
as well.
Yeah, right. Always a possibility as well, and I do think that's part of why that Steelers general manager and front office looked at this offseason. We're like, okay, do we go full rebuild and accept the fact that TJ is going to leave, so we might want to look for a trade for him, or do we try to land the pieces we need to advance further?
Yeah,
And other than one blip, I would say it has been an excellent offseason for that. We filled some of those missing pieces. There was one move that unfortunately has come back to bite them at this point. If they can't get a trade done before the season starts to get another wide receiver, then that Deontay Johnson trade is going to hurt them to start this year. But
yeah,
I know they're looking and
they're
they're
desperate.
well, I don't know if they're desperate because the Steelers team is really good at developing wide receivers, especially rookie wide receivers. And so I think they'll be able to find their stride by week 6 or 7 with Roman Wilson if that's what they have to do. But if they can get a Brandon Ayuk in there for week 1, then they're going to be rolling from week 1 on.
Yeah.
That's
You
sort of
can't
the
have
difference.
George Pickens be the only viable option because
We've seen him. He gets frustrated when he has to deal with double covers,
yeah,
and so
and
that's just it. We do need another guy out there, and but that's where I say if it ends up being that, it's going to be a few weeks of pain. But eventually, Roman Wilson is going to step up and go, well, if he's getting double teamed, then just throw the ball to me, and we're going to see it
that
happen.
that has to
Him
be
or
the
Van
hope.
Jefferson,
Yeah.
you know, like it could happen, but they're still trying to find that trade. Ayuk is still the primary target, but I still wouldn't be surprised to see them start looking elsewhere and try to find somebody else. So it'll happen. Something will happen, I'm sure. That's
Yeah,
the only blip this offseason, though, that I really see the Steelers management having made is that
not finding
trade. But
that really big time wide receiver to help out.
well, and again, without that trade, then we're talking the other side of it, going, well, outside of Joey Porter Jr., we don't have another cornerback.
Yeah.
So that's just it. It's did we want more defense or more wide receiver help? It was this or that. And with the Steelers being so good at developing wide receivers, I think they made the right decision in going for that cornerback instead.
I would lean a little bit more on the opposite side. As we all
Well,
know,
just
I'm more offensive sided, and in
yep.
today's NFL league, you need to score points, and having the best defense in the league to me
Mhm.
means fuck all if you can't score points.
Yep.
You can stop your opponent to 21 points per
Mhm.
game, which is awesome. That's stellar. But if you're only putting up 10 per game or 17 per game, then it doesn't really matter because you're still losing. But
No, but I'm not really worried about the Steelers giving up 21 points a game. This defense is looking that good, and the Steelers build for their division.
yes,
They
yeah,
looked at it and they went, we have to stop Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. We have to stop Lamar Jackson.
yep.
And so they've got all the pieces in place to do that.
They
If
don't have to stop
if we
Deshaun
had
Watson.
known we were going to be able to bring Cameron Sutton back on that contract, I don't think they would have gone ahead to make this trade for Dante Jackson. But now they're looking at it and going, well, trade's done.
Yep.
Now we've got a 1-2-3 for sure at cornerback. So we can double Jamar Chase and we still have a good corner to cover their second guy.
Yeah.
And so that makes a big difference as well. So the
Yeah.
fact that we're going to be able to double up Jamar Chase on the regular and still be able to cover the other side of the field is
Yeah, it's you know me. I'm just always worried that if you don't have weapons, that
Yep.
it doesn't matter how good the defense is that if you can't put points up on the board. And
Yep.
again, this is coming from a Chicago Bears fan that has seen it all too often of like, oh, we're building defense, 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 defense.
Mhm.
Like, oh yeah, it's great. Who's our number one target for the quarterback that we have to throw the ball to? Oh, he's a really promising guy. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, promising.
Yep.
And then how
No, I
well
mean,
has that ever worked out
I,
for the
I agree,
Bears?
man. Like
Yeah,
they need to go and make that trade for the wide receiver, but if they don't, there's
there's going to be some lumps that are
it's
going to be taken, and you're hoping that
right.
the development is going to be there.
Yeah, and this is still going to be a good enough team to again make the playoffs, be that middle of the road. It's going to be tough. We gotta get over that hump. We gotta break this streak. We gotta win a playoff game.
Yeah,
That's why I want them to get the trade done because I really think we get a guy like a Brandon Ayuk, and this team becomes one of the top 5 teams in the league.
I
Just like
I I agree. If you guys can get a Brandon
without him,
Ayuk, I
we're
think
maybe top 15-ish
yeah. Again,
without Ayuk.
I think if you get a Brandon Ayuk, that changes the offense. And again, all it depends is the quarterback that is playing and what your offensive coordinator is calling. Because again, I
Yes.
still don't like Arthur Smith. I
No,
don't
no, but
love the move. And again, we've
I,
talked about it as that's probably one of the best things that probably again we say best in air quotations that they could have done, but it's one
yeah,
of those things of that it can't be any worse than what we had over these last 4 seasons with Matt Canada. It fit like we don't know how it could get worse. I don't think it's going to be much better with Arthur Smith from what I've seen from his play calling as a Falcon. We've talked about this so many times,
yes,
but again, if you get a Brandon Ayuk, that changes so much for the team. And again, I agree. Top 5 right now, top 15 is probably what we're expecting because
yeah.
there's going to be stretches where the
Exactly.
Steelers
Edging
look.
into the playoffs right now is what we're
Yep,
expecting, but with that number one secure whiteout, that changes this team completely because everything else they've done this offseason
has
has
been
filled
a very
those.
good
Yeah,
move. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And so it's tough, this defense, I said it so many times last year, they will hold teams to 19 points or less, and they did most games other than when they played the best of the best, which that's what happens. Um,
there was
and this
the two
offense,
game stretch of where
even
they're facing some of the worst teams in the league and faltered, but yeah,
right. Well,
we're
and
not going to
this
talk
year's
about that.
tougher. Like the Steelers last year had probably the weakest schedule in the league, and so that helped them get to the playoffs. This year, they have probably one of the toughest, if not the toughest, schedule of everybody in the league. So it's night and day last year to this year. They're gonna have to be able to do more this year, and I I'm hopeful that they can.
Yep, yep, and yeah, so I think that's probably about where we're going to do it here today, guys. Thank you all very much for hanging out with us. Make sure to come back next week to check out some of the extra content of basically us doing player bets that we think are basically kind of over unders for what we think for either good players or bad players, and it's going to be a fairly fun one. But thank you all very much for joining us here today. For Sterling, I'm Brendan, and we are saying peace.